Hello, everyone. On behalf of Walters Kluwer, I welcome Dr. Sukhvinder Singh and my people who attended this session for this webinar on echocardiology in emergency medicine and the formal book launch of our book on this webinar. I request Dr. Sukhvinder Singh to please introduce himself to the audience, please. Dr. Sukhvinder, sir, please.
Good evening, everyone. I welcome you all on this session of echocardiography in emergency room and this special occasion of launch of the first South Asian edition of Washington Manual of Echocardiography. First of all, I would like to thank every one of you for attending this webinar in such tough times, and I hope everyone in your family and near and dear ones is staying safe. Currently, I am Associate Director of Cardiology at Max Hospital, Shalimar Bagh, New Delhi. I did my DM Cardiology in 2007, almost 14 years back, and have worked in few prestigious institutions in New Delhi, like St. Stephen Hospital and Delhi Heart and Lung Institute. My major interest is in echocardiography, and along with that, I am doing my own clinical practice. I will start with this, first of all, with a presentation that is echocardiography in emergency room, and then I will take up your questions. Sarvan, can you give me the rights to share?
Sure, sir.
Yeah. Echocardiography in emergency room is one of the interesting and challenging job for an echocardiographer. And before we jump to the various scenarios which we encounter in emergency room, I would like to tell you that for any echocardiographer, not only the knowledge of anatomy and physiology of cardiac condition is important, but a thorough knowledge of pathophysiology and clinical aspects of any problem is also very important. As you will see in some of the very interesting cases we have here to discuss, that clinical acumen should be very good when you are performing echocardiography. That makes your job very easy. Like common presentations for which you will be called in emergency room for doing echocardiography are breathlessness or shortness of breath or dyspnea, chest pain, hemoptysis, cardiomegaly, and sometimes for stroke. Now, dyspnea in cardiology almost always means that there is left atrial hypertension. If we leave aside the rare condition of pulmonary venous obstruction or pulmonary venous occlusive disease, that is PVOD, then dyspnea in cardiology means left atrial hypertension. So whenever you have a patient presenting mainly with breathlessness, your aim should be to see if there is any evidence of left atrial hypertension and if there is any reason for left atrial hypertension. Both the things you should look. The common causes for left atrial hypertension in our country are mitral stenosis, pure diastolic dysfunction like hypertensive heart disease, aortic stenosis, hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, restrictive cardiomyopathy, cases of coronary artery disease, diabetes mellitus, obesity, which are usually associated with heart failure with preserved ejection fraction, or those cases where there is a systolic dysfunction accompanying diastolic dysfunction like myocarditis, dilated cardiomyopathy. Late stages of missed or undiagnosed mitral regurgitation or severe aortic regurgitation can also give rise to breathlessness. If you do not find any of these previously mentioned conditions in your patient, then you just look for presence of anemia, uremia, or chronic kidney disease, obesity, or an obvious pulmonary pathology. And mind it, each one of them has a characteristic echocardiographic picture. Like for example, obesity. If you study diligently, you will find that obesity can produce all the changes of hypertension in heart. Means whatever hypertensive heart disease produces in heart on echocardiography, obesity can do it, up to the severe LV systolic dysfunction, what we call as obesity-induced dilated cardiomyopathy. Coming next to chest pain. Now, a patient presenting with chest pain in emergency room can most commonly will have acute coronary syndrome, and you will find some kind of renal wall motion abnormality on echocardiography. Beside this, patient can have pericarditis or pericardial effusion, and sometimes patient present with aortic dissection. Patient may be having underlying hypertrophic cardiomyopathy as a cause of chest pain, or aortic stenosis as a cause of chest pain, pulmonary artery hypertension, primary pulmonary hypertension as a cause of chest pain. Sometime in young individuals, you may find that you have mitral valve prolapse as a cause of chest pain. Patient presenting with syncope and you get a call from ER, the various things you look for is aortic stenosis, hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, primary pulmonary hypertension, acute myocardial infarction, sometimes present with syncope, dilated LV, mass lesions, pericardial effusion, pulmonary stenosis, pulmonary thromboembolism, and ARVD. These are the various differentials which may present as syncope in emergency room, and you have to look for them. Now, hemopsis. Hemopsis usually is not very common presenting feature in ER, but still you can get a patient who has mitral stenosis or left ventricular failure. Of course, the patient will have breathlessness also in this condition. Then pulmonary thromboembolism and sometimes pulmonary AV fistula, which is a rare condition. If you get a call from a resident who has picked up cardiomegaly in any patient of who's in the ER, then the various differential are pericardial effusion, dilated cardiomyopathy, or you look for specific chamber enlargement. Now, patients who come with stroke and you get a call from ER can have mitral stenosis, aortic wall disease, mitral valve prolapse, dilated dysfunctional left ventricle with a thrombus in it, atrial septal aneurysm, patent foramen ovale, shunt lesions, and you may have a left atrial appendage thrombus. Now we will be discussing and seeing the following cases in detail in today's webinar. These are acute coronary syndrome, aortic dissection, pericardial tamponade, pulmonary thromboembolism, and if time permitted, a few very uncommon but very interesting cases which present to ER and are of importance to an echocardiographer. First of all, acute coronary syndrome. Now, this patient has presented in ER with chest pain and has following echocardiography. You can see this is apical three-chamber view or apical long axis view, where you can see this whole of the anteroseptal wall is hypokinetic. This is slightly tilted apical four-chamber view, again showing that this whole wall is hypokinetic. This is inferior septal wall. This is apical two-chamber view. These may be doing well. This is short axis view. You can see that septum is not moving. It is relatively thin, and there is some hyperepicity also. So this patient has hypokinesia of the anterior circulation, renal wall motion abnormality pertaining to anterior circulation. This is Black's view. Again, you can see hyperechoic, slightly thinned out, and nearly akinetic. anteroseptal septum is there. Now this patient has hypokinesia of the apex. You can see this is apex is dyskinetic. As you can see with systole, it is going away from my marker, or it is going out. This is dyskinetic to mildly aneurysmal. You can see hypokinesia here. You can see hypokinesia here. But here the segments are moving well. So it is purely apical hypokinesia. You can see. Here also you can see apical hypokinesia is there. Now coming to an example of posterior circulation in RWMA. You can see in this short axis view that this part is not moving well. So inferior lateral segment, inferior segment, this is not moving well. This is basal inferior lateral. Here you can see again, this part is relatively hyperechoic and there is hypokinesia of this junction of inferior and inferior lateral segment. This is apical 3-chamber or long axis, apical long axis view. You can see here basal, inferior lateral and mid inferior lateral segments are hypokinetic. Rest of the walls are moving normally, but these two segments are hypokinetic. Now this is slightly tilted apical 2-chamber view, and you can see that there is a relative hypokinesia of basal inferior and mid inferior segments. If you compare it with the apico-inferior segment, you will find that the endocardial excursion of these two segments is reduced. Now, this was the example of 3 patients who presented with chest pain and had acute coronary syndrome. Now I will share a case with aortic dissection. This patient actually presented to our institution with the inferior wall MI. And on clinical examination in the ER, some senior consultant find out that there is a mismatch or discrepancy in the pulses. So he immediately asked for echo, and you can see this hugely dilated aortic root in this Black's view. The windows were not very good. She was of around 59, 60 years of age and female, slightly obese. So windows are not that perfect, but you can easily decipher that there is a dilatation of the aortic root. And if you look carefully, you will find that there is a flap also, this one. Here you see a flap is there. And you see dilatation of the root, and you can easily see the flap here. This is the intimal flap. This one. This patient had aortic regurgitation, as you can see here. Now, this is the suprasternal view. If you look carefully, you can see a flap here in one of the branches of the aortic arch. That is left common carotid artery. There is another intimal flap here, although it is not very clearly visible, but you can see something fluttering here in the arch itself. But this flap is clearly visible. So this patient had dissection which was extending to this left common carotid artery, and patient has dissection involving the right coronary artery itself, which resulted into presentation of inferior wall MI. Now this is the transesophageal echo, one of the other patient who was having aortic dissection. You can see here the intimal flap, and you can see here the true lumen and the false lumen. This is the false lumen, this is the true lumen, and in between you can see this flap. This is basically descending thoracic aorta, transesophageal echo at 90 degrees, as you can see here. So aortic dissection can be one of the presenting features which presents with chest pain, very severe chest pain. If you find a patient crying with chest pain, then more likely it is aortic dissection rather than the acute coronary syndrome, because pain is really severe, especially if it has started from the anterior part of the chest and has gone to back of the chest. More likely it is aortic dissection. Then pericardial effusion, tamponade, this can also present with chest pain. You can see here, there is a huge posterior pericardial effusion, small pericardial effusion here. If you look carefully here, there is a wall replacement. This patient had wall replacement almost 3 to 4 weeks back prior to this presentation. Mitral wall replacement, you can see this is bileaflet wall here, mechanical bileaflet wall, and had huge posterior pericardial effusion. You can see here, this whole is pericardial effusion. If you look carefully, you will see here inversion of RA, or what we call as RA collapse. Yeah, this one, which occur in late diastole, just at the time of RA contraction. You can see here this one, this invagination is RA collapse. Yeah, this one. Yeah, this one. You will see here this one. This is RV collapse, which occurs in early diastole. Yeah. You can see with LV contraction, it comes in and then there is another collapse. LV contraction, it comes in and then there is another inversion. So this second inversion is basically RV collapse. This is a classical RV collapse you see in cases of pericardial effusion. This occurs in early diastole. Now, this is a case of mitral stenosis. As you can see, the opening is restricted. PML mobility is markedly restricted. AML is doming. RV is enlarged. This is a zoomed up view. You can see restricted PML mobility. There is some speck of calcification on the tip of the AML. AML mobility is also restricted, and there is a doming. You can see the turbulence in the mitral inflow. This is apical four-chamber view. This is LA. This is LV. You can see here, this is the continuous wave Doppler across the mitral wall, which is showing a mean gradient of 16. So this is severe mitral stenosis. As you know, any gradient more than 10 defines it as severe mitral stenosis. Okay, this is pressure half time, which is 237 milliseconds here, which corresponds to a mitral wall area of 0.93 centimeter square. This is mitral valve area by planimetry in short axis view. As you can see here, it is coming to be 0.28 centimeter square, which again signifies severe mitral stenosis. This is tricuspid regurgitation in the same patient, showing a right ventricular systolic pressure of 92 millimeter of mercury, which is severe pulmonary hypertension. Again, signifies that there is severe mitral stenosis. Now, one of the rare presentations, we picked it up recently, this in our casualty. The patient presented with a stroke, and you can see here, there is a big fungal mass on tricuspid wall. This patient is having chronic kidney disease. She is on maintenance hemodialysis, and you can see that anterior tricuspid leaflet has this big mass, which turned out to be a fungal ball, as her blood culture was positive for fungus. You can see here. Big fungal ball. Why I chose this video is because recently there is an increase in the number of tricuspid valve endocarditis we are seeing, especially in patients of chronic kidney disease. In last 6 months, I have seen almost 5 such cases. Otherwise, previously we used to see one case in a year or one case in 2 years. So this frequency was very high. So I thought of sharing this with you. And many of these patients presented with CVA. So this is very important. Now this is the report of the culture. Candida para psilocysis is positive. Now this is another case of chest pain who presented in our casualty, and patient was having reverse Takotsubo syndrome. You see here apical 4-chamber view. You look at the other half, apical half, everything is moving. Basal half, both the walls are not moving. So this is reverse of the Takotsubo. In classical Takotsubo, you know, apical segments don't move and basal segments move. So you can see here, apical segments are moving well. Basal inferior septal and basal anterolateral segments are not moving. This is apical 2-chamber view. Again, you can see apical segments are moving well. Basal segments are not moving that well. And this is apical 3-chamber view or apical long axis view. Again, apical part, apical segments both sides moving. Basal segments are almost static. So this corresponds to reverse Takotsubo cardiomyopathy. Angiogram was done in this patient and it was normal. This is right coronary artery, you can see, which is not showing any significant stenosis. And this is left coronary artery, LMCA, LAD, LCX. Okay, not showing any significant stenosis. So this was a case of reverse Takotsubo. This young patient, unfortunate young patient of almost 42 years of age, he was having fever for last 2.5, 3 months. One echocardiogram in the past was reported as normal. Unfortunately, he presented to our casualty with a CVA, not very profound deficit, but it was a cerebrovascular accident. And when I did the echo, you can see here AML as well as PML has vegetations. Both the leaflet has vegetations which are collapsing into LA, huge vegetations, more than 2 centimeters. This is Clack's view, again showing the vegetations from AML as well as the PML. You look carefully, there is a vegetation from PML as well as there is a vegetation from AML. This is again apical 4-chamber view, showing a large vegetation on AML. And this patient had significant mitral regurgitation, almost severe mitral regurgitation is there. This is a colored mode, again showing you the regurgitant part. This is systole, there is regurgitation, there you can see closed leaflet. This is showing a vena contracta of 0.7 centimeters, again correspond to severe MR. Patient was having another vegetation on the non-coronary cusp of the aortic wall also. You can see here collapsing into the alveoli. having mild to moderate aortic regurgitation also. Now there is another interesting case. This young lady presented to us with the intracranial bleed. A lady of 27 years of age and presented with intracranial bleed. There was history of neurological deficit in one half of the body with altered sensorium. When I was called to do the echocardiography in casualty, on initial screening, I find that this echo was normal, but I felt I am missing something. And since this lady was having a lot of agitation, I was not able to examine her properly, but still with the help of the sister in the casualty, I looked for femoral, it was missing. Then I put my stethoscope on her chest. There was a systolic murmur in the left parasternal region. Still, I could not find anything on a re-examination of the transthoracic windows. But as soon as I put my probe on the suprasternal view, I could find something very, very interesting. You can see here, this is left subclavian artery. This is arch of aorta. And you can see that there is a narrowing starting before this left subclavian artery. So there was coarctation of aorta prior to the origin of the left subclavian artery. This is arch, ascending aorta, arch, descending aorta, and you can see a narrowing here. So this young girl was having coarctation of aorta. This is continuous wave Doppler showing you a peak gradient of 74 millimeter of mercury. So severe coarc was there, and you can see there is a diastolic runoff. Up to this part there is systole, and there is this part is diastole, as you can see, decipher from the ECG, and there is a diastolic runoff. Now this diastolic runoff tells you that patient has severe coarctation. So due to severe coarctation, there was upper limb hypertension, which was long-standing, undiagnosed, led to formation of aneurysm in the arteries of brain, and then subsequent IC bleed. Unfortunate for the girl, but this is very, very important for us that we should not miss such cases. Okay, this is the CT aortogram of the lady showing this narrowing in descending thoracic aorta. Okay, now I come to one of the very common presentations in emergency. Especially in the era of the COVID. Pulmonary thromboembolism. As you know, a large number of patients of COVID are coming with thromboembolic episodes of various organ systems. We have seen pulmonary thromboembolism. We have seen splenic artery thromboembolism. So all these patients are coming to us with increased frequency in this COVID era. So I thought I would share this classical case of pulmonary thromboembolism with you. This is a young chap, almost 31, 32 years of age. You can see that IVC size is towards the upper limit, which is 1.9 centimeters. RV is dilated. This is the Plaque's view. You can see RVOT is 3.4 centimeter, which is again dilated. Upper normal limit is 3 centimeters. RA is again dilated, 30.6 centimeter square, which should normally be less than 18 square centimeter. And you can see here, there is a paradoxical IVS motion. This part is systole, and you can see that IVS was moving out rather than coming in. So there is paradoxical IVS motion because of enlarged RV. This is DEPSI in this patient, which is 1 centimeter, which shows that there is RV dysfunction. As we know, anything less than 1.7 centimeters signifies RV dysfunction. This patient has a TVSM or tissue Doppler velocity of the lateral tricuspid annulus of 9 centimeter per second. Anything less than 9.5 centimeter per second is considered abnormal. again signifying RV systolic dysfunction. On this, we have calculated the RIMP, that is right ventricular index of myocardial performance, and it came out to be 0.94. Anything more than 0.54 is considered abnormal by tissue Doppler. When we do RV index of myocardial performance by tissue Doppler, anything more than 0.54 is considered abnormal. So this patient has a RIMP of 0.94, signifying severe RV dysfunction. Now this is pulmonary regurgitation. I have measured the end diastolic gradient here, which is 15 plus 10 millimeter of mercury, almost 25 millimeter of mercury. This is tricuspid regurgitation. Although trace showing a gradient of 45 millimeter of mercury plus 10 millimeter of mercury RAP, so RVSP was somewhere 55. Now this is the apical 4-chamber view, slightly modified. You can see the hypokinesia of this wall here. Okay. Here you can also see hypokinesia of this wall. Now this is subcostal view, clearly showing this hypokinetic RV free wall. This is a proven case of pulmonary thromboembolism. CT pulmonary angiography was done, which showed pulmonary thromboembolism. This is short axis view, and you can see hypokinesia of RV free wall very clearly here. This is upper flex view, again showing RVOT severely hypokinetic. Now, after thrombolytic therapy, post-reticulase therapy, this is the video recorded after almost 3 days of initial presentation. You can see RV size has gone down from 3.4 to 3.2 centimeters. RA size has reduced drastically from almost 30 square centimeters to 15 square centimeter. You can see TR here, although it is very, very faint, difficult to decide, but is showing a pressure of almost 54 plus 3, almost 57. Now, why this is showing increased pressure despite the fact that patient has other improved parameters of RV function is that initially when RV had a huge acute insult, it was not able to generate enough pressure. That's why it was not picking up the true pressure of the pulmonary artery or pulmonary hypertension. Now, this is RIMP, which has come down from almost 94 to 41, showing significant improvement in RV functions. This is fractional area change, which is 0.5. As we know, anything more than 0.35 is normal for RV. So RV functions have improved dramatically. This is STEPS-A, which has increased from 1.0 to 1.8. And TVSM has also gone up from 0.9 to 0.09 to 0.12 meter per second. And you can see yourself how improved the contractility of free wall here in apical 4-chamber view. You can see RV has recovered almost completely from that initial insult after the thrombolytic therapy. You can see here this wall has also much improved contractility after the thrombolytic therapy. This is flex view. You can compare the difference between that nearly akinetic RV free wall in RVOT and this very well contracting RV free wall. The apical 4-chamber view again. So this was case of pulmonary thromboembolism. Okay, now I would like to invite your questions on this topic. Any questions from your side?
Dr. Singh, I'm just looking into the Q&A panel. Let me just check.
Any question from your side on this topic or any topic in echocardiography?
Dr. Singh, so far, I don't see any questions here, but yes, I want to ask you how relevant
Yeah.
is this echocardiography, like when as a topic suggested, it's an emergency room. And if you look into today's scenario of COVID, how important this is it an important function of echocardiography, which is now can be used in the COVID emergency?
Very frankly speaking, my experience of nearly 1,000 echocardiograms in COVID has uh, taught me that COVID is not primarily affecting heart. So most of the echoes are coming to be normal, or they are only showing RV dysfunction secondary to pulmonary hypertension, which is secondary to extensive lung damage. So primarily, if you ask Ravi, there is not much role of echocardiography in COVID, except for those scenario where sometimes you suspect there is a pulmonary thromboembolism, or when you have very high D dimer values and you want to rule out that there is pulmonary thromboembolism, then you can get an echocardiography done. But otherwise, in COVID, it is primarily involving the lungs, and any involvement of heart is only secondary to the extensive lung damage and subsequent hypoxemia and pulmonary hypertension.
Okay, great. So I just request all my attendees, if they have any questions, they may put it on the chat panel or a Q&A panel of the screen of this WebEx session. So we'll just take 2 more minutes, to see if there are any questions Q&A which are coming in the chat panel and the Q&A session. Post that, we'll just go ahead and formally launch the product, which is one of the best books on echocardiography, which is Washington Manual of Echocardiography. Now we have just launched the SAE edition of it, and Dr. Singh is an SAE editor of this particular book. So, Sravanan, I request you to, can we please, I'll just give you presenting rights. Can you please showcase, can we go ahead with the launch of this product?
Absolutely, we can.
Great. So I'm giving you the presenting rights, Sravanan. I request you to please showcase the book cover of the title. And Dr. Singh, I request you to please, can you please let us know the key features? What is the important thing about this book and how it is relevant in the current scenario and all the practitioners like MD medicine students and also the practicing cardiologists in the country?
Yeah, basically we launched this adaptation of Washington Manual of Echocardiography, keeping in mind the residents, the people who are MD medicine and practicing echocardiography. Because this is a very precise text, very small, very handy, and gives you a lot of information in a very small volume. especially for those who are new to echocardiography or who are not very, you can say, not a seasoned hand in echocardiography, they will find it very useful because you can quickly go through how to perform, how to interpret also, and what are the common differential diagnoses of the conditions you are looking at. From that point of view, we have adapted it, or you can see modified it slightly for Indian context, adding a few things which are more common in India scenario, like mitral stenosis, like tubercular constrictive pericarditis, like we have ARVD. So these conditions are relatively common in Asian population. So we have incorporated greater details of these conditions as compared to what you can say US edition. And I find this book very handy and up to date, including all the recent guidelines, the criteria for chamber estimation, for physiological parameters, all have been up to date as per the recent guidelines. I think it will be a very useful book for those, especially who are performing echocardiography for relatively lesser period, like say 1 year, or they are totally naive, or they are performing echocardiography only for 2 years. They will find it very good. And those residents who are in night duty and they do not have any guidance from the seniors at that time, they will find this book very useful. Yes, Sarvarat?
Dr. Singh, any important chapters, which, because see, I understand, it's in US edition of the book, and when we brought out the South Indian edition of this particular title, I believe you must have, so all the chapters are there which are already in the book, or we have added some more chapters to this book, some more content, new content.
Yeah, we have added new content basically in mitral stenosis, which is more common in India as compared to US. We have added more content in tubercular constrictive pericarditis. We have added more content in arrhythmogenic right ventricular dysplasia. Besides this, we have tried to correct whole of the text, complete text from word A to word Z as per the latest guidelines, as per the latest literature. So whatever were the changes in last 3-4 years when the previous edition, US edition was launched, anything new which has come up in the literature has been added or modified as per the current literature. And we have added almost 70-80 new figures or pictures to this text which are not there in the previous US edition.
Great. Sir, when you say there are also the multiple choice question for self-assessment. Now, generally, when I've seen all the MCQs are basically for undergraduate level, students. But when you have added the MCQs in this level, which is, I think, most for the postgraduate level, maybe book, you can say that, or maybe third year, fourth year students can, go through it also. But what is more important about the MCQs which is given, which are given in the book?
There is one major difference between the US edition and this South Asian edition is that we have added a large number of multiple choice questions. And Sarvanam, they are not of the level of undergraduates. Basically, they are of the level of postgraduates. So only those who are in the final year of MD or those who have passed their MD, these are very useful questions, not only for refreshing their knowledge of echocardiography, but these questions will help them when they are appearing for entrance of super specialty courses like DM cardiology or DNB cardiology. Because each and every entrance exam of DM cardiology or DNB cardiology contains almost 5% to 10% questions pertaining to echocardiography. So for those huge, I would say this is a huge number for any topic, 5 to 10%. These MCQs will be immensely helpful.
Great. Thank you so much, sir. Sir, there are few questions which are now coming up. So I'll just
Yeah, sure,
Because,
sure, sure.
so there's a question called why CVA in TV fungal ball? The question, I repeat the question, why CVA in the TV fungal ball?
Yeah, you are right. What happened in this patient is this lady I presented with. This patient was having one most likely a vegetation which was not very apparent on mitral valve itself. So that caused the most likely the CVA. But when she came and presented with these pictures, we find this huge fungal ball only, which was probably associated with previous hemodialysis procedure. You're right, a tricuspid valve fungal ball will not cause a CVA. The presentation of this lady was with CVA only.
Okay. Okay, great. Let me see if there are any more questions are there. Great. Yeah, there's a question not to the you sir, but as a general, there are people who are asking whether the book is available as an e-version and all. So I would like to tell all my attendees that this book is also available as a Kindle version, which is also available on Amazon India. So people can certainly go and buy it. So I think it's almost time now. I would like to thank Dr. Singh, who has taken the time out and giving us the interesting topic on the echocardiography, which are quite relevant to the practicing cardiologist and also the postgraduate and medicine students in the country. Also, I would like to thank all the attendees who have participated in this webinar. And as a Wolters Kluwer from Wolters Kluwer, I promise you that we'll bring out some more such webinar in the future. And I would like to, wish all the best of health and to the family members of all the attendees and the participants. And Dr. Singh, I thank you again to taking out your time from your busy schedule and deliver us the webinar like this. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarvanam. Thank you, Ravi. And thanks to all the attendings. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. We'll also be sending out the recording of the video to all the attendees and the people who are registered for the webinar. Thank you so much. Good day ahead.